Welcome to episode 8 of the Neoncast, brought to you by Underoos, the brand that's all of a sudden making an inexplicable comeback. I skipped last week because of reasons, and also I didn't really have a ton to talk about. I kind of penciled out like a thing, but then some shit happened and I was like, fuck it. But here I am this week with things to talk about galore, I guess. I mean, I'm not going to talk about too many things. I might talk for a long time about the few things that I do want to talk about. Briefly, we can mention that there was a Ghostbusters trailer last weekend, and the internet was not a fan, and it spawned a million think pieces trying to break down the reason why people didn't like it, attributing it to many a socio-political issue. But I said I wouldn't talk about that, so I will not. I was not a fan of the trailer, not because it stars women or whatever, despite what the blogosphere would have you think. I'm not a huge fan of that kind of brand of humor that's going on now. That whole awkwardy bridesmaids. I don't know. I haven't seen a comedy in years that I really enjoyed. The movies that make me laugh are movies that are situationally funny, but aren't a straight comedy. Deadpool made me laugh a lot. Krampus was a movie that made me laugh a lot. It has a lot of really funny moments and jokes in it. Stuff like Shaun of the Dead and Zombieland and such. Those are movies that I consider funny. Cabin in the Woods, another movie that I think is very funny. So that to me is the biggest problem with that. Is just that I'm not really attracted to movies that are just funny instead of just being a movie that has a lot of funny stuff in it, but also has more to that. And you know what? I'll be fair. I suspect that the Ghostbusters movie is going to be funnier than the trailers make it seem, because the trailer is very cookie cutter. It's edited like a trailer, which I never like. And we're going to talk about a little later when I review 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is what I'm going to spend a bunch of time doing this week. But yeah, this trailer was very sort of formulaic, and I think that kind of short sells a lot of the stuff that might be in it. So I'll give it a little bit of credit for that. But yeah, I just didn't I don't know. Not for me. And Melissa McCarthy, there's this movie called The Nines. It's with her and Ryan Reynolds. It's a Canadian movie from years ago. Nobody knows it except for me. And it's really good. And it's really weird. It's mind-bendy, what's real, what's not real. And Melissa McCarthy and Ryan Reynolds both play multiple different characters in it. And it's great. It's a really good, underrated movie. So right off the bat, I can just say, go watch The Nines. I think it's on Netflix. It used to be, certainly. I don't know if it still is. But just a really sort of cool, lesser known movie that I really enjoy. And she just kills it. Like I said, she plays many different characters in it. It's dramatic. It's not a comedy, although it does have some weirdly funny stuff in it. But I'm kind of disappointed that she doesn't do more stuff like that. She's kind of pigeonholed into that funny person sort of place. And I do think she's funny. She was on the Saturday Night Live 40th anniversary doing a Chris Farley impression that was just legendarily funny. I howled laughing. She was doing his motivational speaker bit. But yeah, that's Ghostbusters. But the trailer that made everybody go bananas was the second Captain America Civil War trailer that came out and got, I think, almost 100 million views in its first 24 hours, like 94, 95 million, which I think is only second to The Force Awakens, which got like 112 million or something like that. And broke the internet for more than one reason, but mainly for a webbed Spidey reason. But it was just a good trailer. It had a lot of interesting things in it. I think that there's still a little bit of sort of ambiguity. People aren't really sure what's going to happen in it. I mean, that's true for all movies, I guess. But if you look at a movie like Age of Ultron, for instance, like if you go back to the trailers for that, it was very clear what was going to happen in that movie. Ultron was going to get created, and the Avengers were going to fight Ultron, and going to defeat Ultron. And sure, stuff happened in that movie and the developments, and you didn't know everything that was going to happen, whatever. But like, you generally got the sense that this was the plot line of this movie. Ultron gets created. Ultron tries to destroy the world. Avengers have to fight him. The end. This movie is way more intricate and complex than that, and we're not exactly sure what's going to happen in it. We know that there's a division between the Avengers, and we know essentially who's on whose side. But there's stuff we haven't seen yet. We have no idea how it's going to end. I mean, the comic storyline of Civil War transitions into, spoiler alert, the death of Captain America, which isn't really a spoiler because that's the name of the story, the death of Captain America. But because the Civil War storyline is so different in the comics, I mean, it's different only because there's like a million different characters in it that aren't in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This, by the way, I all know secondhand. So like if I make mistakes here, that's why. I haven't read it. I just know from listening to people who know. But yeah, like the triggering event of the split within the Avengers is totally different in the comic storyline. It relates to characters that aren't in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The New Radicals or something like that they're called, and Nitro, and they have some kind of battle, and a bunch of children die, and then it's like, and there's this whole thing about unmasking, where here it's like in the comic book, like nobody knows who Captain America is, nobody knows who Iron Man is, and here it's not. That's not the case. Like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they kind of did away with the idea that everybody's identity is a secret, which I kind of like. I think that's a sort of a novel approach to it, because there's always this whole like, how do Superman puts on glasses? How does nobody know? How does nobody know that Batman? There's only one person in Gotham City who can afford to build of cars and planes, and how would nobody suspects that it's Bruce Wayne? So here they were just like, you know what, fuck it. We're just going to say that Tony Stark's Iron Man, which kind of makes sense for his character because he's sort of, an egoist. And like at the end of Iron Man, where he has this press conference and like he's trying to deny that he's Iron Man. He's like, fuck it. Yes, I'm Iron Man. And then, it goes immediately into Iron Man 2. I'll touch a little more on that in a second, but like it goes into Iron Man 2 and he's already like this giant mega celebrity. Like the first scene in Iron Man 2 after the introduction of the villain is him arriving at Stark Expo, like in an Iron Man suit, like jumping out of a plane and like landing with like AC/DC and cheerleaders. And like he shows up in like the Iron Man suit. So they're just like, screw, we're just going to do away with the whole idea of like secret identities or whatever, which is interesting, but it just means that the whole storyline is going to be different. So whereas the comic storyline transitions, like I said, into the death of Captain America, we have no idea what's going to happen here. Now, word is that the ending is very emotional and it's very controversial. And so there's a lot of speculation that somebody's going to die. Is it going to be Captain America? Maybe they'll twist it around. Maybe they'll kill Iron Man. I know Robert Downey Jr. gets paid amounts of money that make it a little non-feasible to keep him around in the Marvel universe forever. And besides, like the whole idea of like passing the mantle of a hero from person to person is not unheard of. I mean, Captain America, I do believe somebody else becomes, I think I think Bucky becomes Captain America after Captain America dies in the comic, and then there's like the whole like there's different Thors and there's different Batmans and there's different Robins and there's different. I mean, I know that's DC. I'm just talking generally about comic books. Like the idea that the person who is a certain superhero either dies or retires or something, and somebody else takes up that mantle is not unheard of at all. Not to mention that once we go into Infinity War and we got the Infinity Gems, then they're basically capable of doing anything. So like you kill somebody, you bring him back to life, you go back in time, you pull into another universe and pull someone out of a different reality. And that also happens a lot in the comic storyline. Like I think the whole SpiderMan thing is like Spider-Gwen exists in an alternate universe where Peter Parker died and she couldn't save him, and then Spider-Man is in a world where Gwen Stacy died and he couldn't save her, and then so they developed this kind of like this bond where like Spider-Man's like I couldn't save my Gwen, and Spider-Gwen's like I couldn't save my Peter Parker, so like we have this kind of like fellowship. So I don't even rule out the idea that they could go into like an alternate universe and maybe pull in that universe's Captain America, who's somebody else, Iron Man, who's somebody else. Basically anything can happen. That's my point. My point is there's a lot of question marks, and which makes it exciting. Like I like that idea. I guess the same applies to Batman v Superman, which I'm going to see in a couple of weeks, and obviously I'm going to talk about when I see that. But there's this fear that like the trailers revealed the progress of that story, and also since we know that this goes into Justice League, we do know that Batman and Superman are eventually going to find some kind of common ground. The question is, how is that going to happen, and why is that going to happen? And because they have this ideological split that's so intense. And I recently rewatched. I was going to say I've been kind of rewatching some of both Marvel and DC, quote unquote. There's only one, Man of Steel. I rewatched that, and I watched Iron Man 2, and I'm gonna rewatch Iron Man 3, just going back a little and kind of brushing up. And I rewatched the first Avenger as well, the first Captain America movie, and the whole Man of Steel thing. It seems it's gonna be very hard because this trailer sets up Bruce Wayne as being very anti-Superman. He was in Metropolis when it got demolished in the Superman versus Zod fight, and he's very distrustful, and something major is going to have to happen to convince him that Superman is good, and that it's for them to kind of get on the same page, because it also sets up Superman as being very anti-Batman in these trailers, and saying to him, stay down. If I wanted you'd be dead already. And next time they shine your light up, don't show up. Like it's not just that Batman's like, fuck you, Superman. And Superman's like, no, I'm a good guy. Superman's like, no, fuck you back, Batman. You're a vigilante, and I don't appreciate that. I'm not sure why exactly that's the case yet. But they are setting up this very severe ideological split that is going to be interesting to see how they transition. But there is this general idea that like, okay, they're going to fight. Wonder Woman's going to show up. There's going to be a doomsday fight. There's going to maybe be a spoiler alert, Lex Luthor in a mecha power suit or something. I don't know that that's true, by the way. So it's not exactly a spoiler. It's rumors. I don't know if it's confirmed or not because I haven't looked into it. I know that there's a lot of like toy-based spoilers, which are my least favorite spoilers in the world. If people are like, oh, there's going to probably be a Giant Man in Civil War because the Lego Civil War set has a Giant Man in it. I'm like, that's such a lame way to get spoiled on the plot of a movie. Is like they're putting out some kind of toy that clues you in on what's gonna happen. So I didn't look into the whole rumor that the final battle in Batman v Superman is actually going to be against some kind of powered Lex Luthor thing. So it might happen and might not. But even if it does or doesn't, there's more of an idea of how that movie is going to progress than Civil War. I mean, there is you can sort of understand the progression of Civil War, I think, by looking at the trailers. But there's still a lot of unknowns, especially since the guy who's supposedly the main antagonist of this, Baron Zemo, we haven't seen him at all. We don't know what he's going to look like. We know he's in it. He gets top billing. If you look at the recent poster, it says like it shows like the teams and Cap and Iron Man are like front and center, like, you know, facing off against each other, and there's like the rest of the teams are like staggered backwards in the background, and there's like names above, and it'll say something like Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans stuff, and then the final one is the name of the guy who plays Baron Zemo, which means he's gonna probably be kind of a big part of it, but we still haven't seen him at all. So that's interesting, and also like a big sort of question mark over this. So yeah, exciting. And I didn't even talk about SpiderMan yet, so let's talk about SpiderMan a little. SpiderMan finally makes his appearance here. Now, I know a lot of people were disappointed by this, but you have to understand something. If you're a big comic book fan, you knew Spider-Man was going to be in this because of the news that Marvel managed to sign a deal to bring Spider-Man back into the Marvel universe. Now, if you're not a big comic book fan, that piece of news would be meaningless to you. If you ask a casual person who likes to watch X-Men and Spider-Man movies and Marvel movies, they don't know that these things, there's this intellectual property rights split. They don't know that X-Men is over here and the Fantastic Four is over there and Spider-Man's over here and Marvel's like X-Men play a part in the Civil War storyline in the comic books. They're not here. Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Again, Quicksilver is technically the same Quicksilver from X-Men Days of Future Past. That's the same person. But they can't do that, so they have to find all kinds of weird ways to like make them exist at the same time. But so they couldn't keep the fact that Spider-Man was going to be in this a secret. Otherwise, people wouldn't know. And there's proof of this, like friends of mine who are big comic book fans, but have like friends, brothers, family members who aren't, said like, my brother texted me and was like, what, Spider-Man's in this? I didn't know that. And I was like, yeah, I know. That's exactly why they had to bring this up. And Spider-Man is a huge draw, very popular character. People love Spider-Man. People who were maybe lukewarm about this movie are more excited about it because Spider-Man's going to be in it. I mean, I certainly am. I mean, I'm super, super excited about this even without Spider-Man, but the fact that he's going to be in it is going to be very cool. And I love the look that they did for him. There were complaints that he looked too CGI-ish in the trailer, but that's a technical matter. If you look at high-res photos of him and of the trailer itself, I think there's like a 4K version that you can kind of like blow up like real big. You'll see that it's a video compression thing. His suit is woven very tightly, and when you watch like a YouTube video that's even like if it's 720 and you watch it on a small screen, the compression of those little details makes it look very cartoony. But if you blow it up to like a giant screen size, I even tweeted at Neon Taster a couple of days ago, close-ups of his suit where you can see that it looks very sort of clothy-like with like a very dense woven material. But then if you look at it like zoomed out, it looks like a complete CGI thing. It's very weird. But that's a completely artificial, like visual artifacting problem. Like if you go see this on the big screen, I guarantee it's going to look like a suit. And I'm not a big comic book guy. I keep saying this. I mean, I love all the stuff that's associated with this. I didn't grow up reading comic books. But this is a very sort of classic Spider-Man look. I mean, even I know that. Even I saw, especially when the eyes kind of narrow, which I know other people didn't like, but this isn't a Deadpool, like cartoony eyes changing shape thing. This is like a mechanical thing, and there's all kinds of rumors about the fact that he's going to have two suits, and one of them is the one that Peter Parker made himself, and then there's one that Stark makes for him. In the comics, that's Iron Spider, which is like a suit that has like mechanical spider arms attached to it and stuff. But they might just go with this suit as being like the final form Spider-Man, and he may have some kind of mechanical element to his eyes or whatever. So yeah, I like that. Mechanical web shooters, whatever. I like that. I like the voice. I like that he's just a kid. He has this whole like, hey everyone, kind of like little sort of timid introduction, which is I thought was terrific. That was very Spider-Man to me, because he has this cool sort of vicious look, and he strikes this pose, but then the voice is like, hey guys, are we gonna fight or something? Like that to me is very Spider-Man. Yeah, Civil War gonna be exciting. Can't wait. And as I said, I was rewatching some of the Marvel stuff leading up to it. I was having these discussions with people about which Marvel movies were considered must watch. And this is debatable, I guess. And I also came up with the notion that you can actually follow. I mean, so clearly the biggest two stars in this are Iron Man and Captain America. I don't know if that was initially the intention. I think it kind of followed along the lines of like which characters resonated more with others and which had more content. I know like Hulk, there were like 2 attempts to get Hulk to get Hulk to be like a thing. It's just not, people just aren't connecting with him as like a star of a franchise. Even Thor, not so much. I mean, people like Thor. I like Thor. I think Chris Hemsworth does an amazing job as Thor, but it's this otherworldly thing. It's almost like a weird, like science fiction-y epic that takes place somewhere else and is very sort of loosely tied to our world, whereas both Cap and Iron Man are very sort of world-centric superheroes. And they're the 2 main ones, and you can follow their thread arcs by watching different sets of Marvel movies. So like if you want to follow the Iron Man arc, you would watch the Iron Man movies and the 2 Avengers movies like in chronological order. So like you would watch like Iron Man and Iron Man 2, and then you would watch the Avengers, and then you would watch Iron Man 3, and you would watch Age of Ultron, which would lead you up to Civil War. Like that's Iron Man's story leading up to Civil War. Captain America, you can watch Captain America, and then you can watch the Avengers, and then you can watch Winter Soldier, and Age of Ultron. That's the Captain America storyline. I feel like the Captain America storyline ends up being better. I think the Iron Man sequels kind of stumble kind of heavily, but it's almost not their fault. I think Captain America, especially the Winter Soldier, benefited from coming in a little later, and having a better idea of like how to establish its tone with regard to what'll come afterwards. So the Winter Soldier is more sober and kind of gritty and stuff, whereas the second Iron Man is like silly and has like a bumbling villain. And I love Sam Rockwell, but I think that the idea of like a Stark wannabe sort of bumbling fool was just a terrible idea. And they kind of repeated that mistake in Iron Man 3. I'm going to rewatch that today, I think. So I don't have as many comments about that, but I do remember that the whole idea of like where the Mandarin ends up being this like red herring was just a really bad idea and just kind of just didn't land, I thought. Yeah. So anyway, that's that. First week of May, Civil War. I think it's gonna do just gangbusters. Like I think it's gonna make buckets of money. I really think people are gonna be super happy with that movie. So we'll see. And anyway, I mean, I've been speaking about this for like 25 minutes. So I went to see 10 Cloverfield Lane, and I promise this is probably the last time I'm going to talk about it. It's become a bit of a a running joke for me because the first Neoncast that I did sort of dealt with 10 Cloverfield Lane because the teaser for it had just come out. And it was like, this movie's coming out in 2 months. And up until then, nobody really knew that it was even being made. And I was like, that's interesting, So it became almost like a running weird thing where I kept talking about it. It's a small movie and whatever. But I kept coming back to it. But so I finally went and saw it. And you know what? I really, really liked it. I thought it was really good. And it's not, how am I going to explain this? It's a small movie. It's not a movie that's crucial to go see on the big screens. Put it that way. It's not. The first Cloverfield's a monster movie, and there's a monster in it. It destroys buildings, and there's a lot of large scale events in it. This isn't that, certainly. And I think you can probably guess that just by looking at it. Oh, by the way, this is going to be not spoilery for a while. At some point, I'm gonna spoil a little. I mean, I'm gonna ease into it. There's a couple of things I want to say that are mildly spoilery, but not really. If you want to see this totally blind, like if you saw the trailer and you're like, this looks interesting, I don't want to know anything about this, then stop listening right now, I would say, and see it and then listen to my comments. If you, I'll still give you a warning when I get to a point where I'm going to actually say things that will like ruin the fun. But there's a few things that I want to say that are sort of mild comments that are a little bit, that clue you in a little bit on stuff that happens in it. So if you don't mind that kind of stuff, you can stick around. But I will tell you if I intend to really like give away stuff, like Bruce Willis was dead the whole time type stuff. Spoiler for The Sixth Sense. So yeah, it's not a movie that's critical to see on the big screen. I thought it was fun to see in a movie theater because it's very tense, and it has moments of tension that are broken sometimes in very sort of loud fashion. I wouldn't really call it jump scares, but it is like a few of the scenes in Inglourious Bastards. You know how there's that scene in the beginning, and also there's a scene later with Christoph Waltz, and there's just this palpable tension where you're just like, something's about to happen, and it just stretches and stretches and stretches, and just edge of your seat, like kind of gripping your hands and just like just waiting for something to happen. And that's fun to see in a movie theater where everything's loud and you're in the dark, and it's sort of an immersive experience, but not a movie that I would necessarily rush out and see. I mean, it's good to go see a movie like this in the theater because it's a small time movie. They took a chance on making this, and I'm a fan of supporting projects like that because I think it's good to encourage more of this kind of thing. And it looks like it's going to do pretty well. I think it costs like $5 million to make. It's probably going to make $25 million in its first weekend, which is not a big box office success for something that costs $100 million, but you make 5 times your production budget. And they didn't spend that much money promoting this. It was mostly promoted virally on Twitter and other social media. I think their returns on this are pretty good. So I would be happy to see more movies like this. I don't need every movie to have, hordes of monsters and fleets of aliens, and not everything has to be the finale to Man of Steel, the finale to the Avengers. Not everything has to be Star Wars. Ex Machina was a great movie, and there was very little going on there. This actually reminded me a lot of Ex Machina. They both feel like sort of Twilight Zone episodes, where the entire time you have this uneasy feeling and you're like, what's going on? I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's real. I don't know who's lying and who's telling the truth. and then you think you know, and then it flips on its head, and then it flips on its head again. So if you liked Ex Machina in that sense, I would really, really go see this. Very, very strongly recommended in that sense. Tense, weird suspense thrillers that are science fiction-y. I mean, you know that this is science fiction-y. Certainly, that's not a spoiler. I just don't want to say more on that in this respect. But really strong performances from all three actors, especially John Goodman, who is just fantastic in this and is just a strong presence every time he's on screen. You're just like, what is he gonna do? And you just hang on his every expression and his every word. He is really, really good. And here's a mild, like I said, this isn't a spoiler, but if you really would like to just go in and see this blind, don't listen to the next sentence I'm gonna say. But a thing that I'm gonna give this movie a huge amount of credit for is that the trailer really tricks you regarding the sequence of events in this movie. Okay, you know what? How about this? Starting at this point, I'm gonna start to transition into spoilers. So I would say that if you didn't see this movie and you want to go see it, stop listening now. I will. You know what? In the below in the description of the YouTube video, I'll put in a little time code, although I don't think I'm going to say much more after this. So at Neon Taster, at Neoncast, neoncastpod at gmail.com. So yeah, that's this week's episode if you want no spoilers at all. And if you do, we're going to go into a little bit of spoilers now. So I'm going to give you a little buffer to shut this off. Musical interlude. Do 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 do. Okay, so now here we go. So the trailer tricks you into the sequence of events. You know how earlier in this episode I was talking about Batman v Superman and how you're just like, it's going to be Batman, it's going to be Superman, and then Doomsday is going to show up, and then so this trailer depicts a sequence of events that in the movie happen completely in reverse. The trailer is like. They're in the bunker. They're slowly trying to plan their escape, and then at the end, she finally figures out how to do it. She smashes John Goodman in the head with the bottle. She grabs the keys. She runs out. He tries to chase her. He's out the door. He's like, "Don't go out. Don't go out." You think that happens in the end? That happens in the beginning, and. Not right at the beginning, but I mean, there's a whole scene where she ends up in the bush. She has a car accident. She ends up in the bunker, and John Goodman's like, I saved your life. Don't go outside. Something happened, and there was some kind of attack, and it's unsafe for you to go outside. And she's obviously skeptical because he's like a lunatic. He's like a doomsday prepper type character. So then the trailer makes you think that whole thing where she makes a break for it is at the end, but that happens way at the beginning. And when I saw that, I was like, that really threw me. And then I was like, awesome, because now I have no idea what was going to happen. I was like, okay, it's going to be 45 minutes of them trying to figure out how to grab the keys and run for the door or whatever. But then that wasn't that at all. And that because the trailer kind of cleverly threw you off like that, then the rest of the movie's all gravy. Because then you're like, and there's a bunch of stuff that happens in it that you have no indication of in the trailer at all, which is, again, a very smart way to do it. And as I said, extremely tense, and John Goodman is just magnificent. He has these random outbursts. There's a scene early on where I guess if you don't want to see this movie, I can kind of describe a little bit of it. So whatever. So she wakes up in the bunker. He says to her, I saved you. You were in a car accident, and everyone's dead outside. I think it was a nuclear attack. It was a chemical attack. I'm not sure. The air is poisonous. You can't go outside or whatever. And in the bunker with him is another guy, Emmett, who's his neighbor. He's John Goodman's neighbor, and he helped him build this bunker. It's like I said, he's like a doomsday prepper. He has like pantries full of like dried goods and water purifiers and he set himself up to survive the apocalypse in this bunker. And Emmett's like, I saw something. He sort of corroborates his story. He's like, I saw something happen, and I immediately made a dash for this guy's bunker, and they're in there. And so there's a scene very early on where they sit down to have dinner or whatever. And I'm not sure exactly what Mary Elizabeth Winstead is thinking, but she gets kind of flirty with Emmett, and does a thing where she kind of brushes his hand. She's like, "Can you hand me the pepper or whatever?" And he does, and she grabs it. She kind of smiles at him and kind of brushes her hand against him. And John Goodman goes bananas and just starts screaming and he smacks her up against the wall, and he's like, "You think I don't see what you're up to? You're showing me a lack of respect," or whatever, and yelling. And it's this crazy scene, and he goes off the handle just for no reason. And then the entire rest of the movie, you're like, what's going to set him off this time? And it's a clever way to keep you on your toes. And they play with it. They play with that idea where sometimes you think he's going to do something crazy and he doesn't. And then other times, yes, he does. He'll be like, they're playing like charades or something like that. But it's not charades. It's like I don't know the name of that game. It's like charades, but instead of like visually trying to get the person to guess the clue, you do it like verbally. So like he says like one of the clues is like Little Women or whatever. So he's like, she is a what's the opposite of big? First word. What's the opposite of big? Little. And then what is she? She's a girl. She's a woman. Whatever. It's one of those. So then it's John Goodman's turn, and at this point, they're kind of planning some kind of escape, whatever, without him knowing. And he looks at his card and he says, "I know what you're up to." And they're kind of like, what are you talking about? He's like, I watch you while you sleep. I know you've been bad. I know everything about you. And they're like, what do you, and he kind of gets agitated and starts like screaming, "I know, I'm on to you. I know what you're doing," or whatever. And then like, it builds and builds and builds. And then Mary Elizabeth Winstead goes like, "Santa Claus, you're Santa Claus." And he's like, "Yep." And that was like the right answer or whatever. So like they kind of, there's a lot of misdirection, but then other times when you think, they're trying to play with me, he does do something like insane. I won't even do the nasty shit here and tell you what happens at the end. But I will say that J.J. Abrams teased a sequel to this that I would be happy to watch, although the beauty of this movie is not the world that it built. It's just how the plot progressed. Like I said, you never know what's going to happen next. In fact, even if I maybe and maybe not, like I was gonna say that even if I spoiled the end for you, it would still be fun to watch but that's not entirely true, because like I said, the not knowing is a big part of the appeal that this has. It's just you sit there and like every scene ends and another scene begins and you're like, all right, what now? What's gonna happen now? I don't know. And it does good use of uses one set basically, and it uses it really well, and it really gives you a good sense of like claustrophobia, and it has some really good twists, and it has a really interesting ending. I don't know. I think some people might not be super happy with it, but then again, this kind of movie is never gonna please everyone. I mean, I already saw some people didn't like it. And it really doesn't have anything to do with Cloverfield, if that's what you're thinking, but that's fine. I mean, I enjoyed Cloverfield. I thought it made interesting use of the found footage genre. There's a few movies that I think do clever things and interesting things with the found footage genre. I give a lot of credit to the Blair Witch Project for being, it's actually not the first movie. There's one or two other ones that did it before, but like that one kind of put that sort of concept on the map. And then you got stuff like Troll Hunter, the movie that I already recommended here a few episodes ago, and also Cloverfield, and also like Chronicle. A few movies that do clever things with it. And Cloverfield was clever in the sense that it wasn't just a sort of a small event depicted through that lens. It was a bigger event. It kind of had that like, I guess a little bit of like sort of an allegory of like 9/11, like experiencing like a 9/11 event from like the lens of like a handheld camera, I guess. I thought it was sort of clever in that respect, but I'm not attached to the Cloverfield universe. Like I wasn't disappointed when the end came along and I was like, okay, so this isn't a Cloverfield sequel at all. It's more like I said, a Twilight Zone. You know, like you watch 2 episodes of the Twilight Zone, they're not connected. They don't have the same plot. It's an anthology show. So it's almost like the quote unquote Cloverfield brand can almost be like that. Like, oh, it's another movie in that sort of Cloverfield that Cloverfield umbrella that's kind of like mysterious. You're not sure what a thing is or whatever. I don't know. Maybe people who are more cynical will say like this is a cynical retcon to cash in on like the Cloverfield name, but I don't know that Cloverfield was that big of a brand that this would make sense. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I in either way, it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me that it's called 10 Cloverfield Lane, and it didn't bother me that it's not, a sequel to that movie with that monster or whatever. It's its own thing. It's cool. It's a small movie that does a lot with little, like I said, kind of like Ex Machina. And yeah, just a really tense, interesting experience, edge of your seat, really good performances. The dialogue's good. It has some really clever moments of like humor, like awkward humor, in the sense that like, you know how like sometimes like people use humor to like break tension. There's a lot of that here, and it really, really contributes to it. Like there was a lot of nervous laughter in the movie theater because you could tell people were like, like really tense and like on the edge of their seat, and then something kind of silly happens, and then everybody has a little like sort of like a little like titter of nervous laughter. So yeah, that's about it, and I think that's basically all I'm going to say this week. I don't know what's going to happen next week, the week after that. As I said, I'm going to see Batman v Superman on Saturday, so like the Saturday after next. And hopefully then on that Sunday I'll sit down and maybe talk about whether or not I liked it. I mean, I think I will. I read an early review that said, if you liked Man of Steel, you'll like this. And if you liked Man of Steel and didn't like the ending, this will kind of redeem that to you. Because interestingly enough, like I'm a big fan of Man of Steel. I watched it again the other day, and there were a few things about it that didn't bother me the first couple of times I watched it, and now a little bit. But the big problems that people have with it are problems that I don't share. I think it does something very clever and interesting. with the Superman story in the sense that it shows us how Superman gains his ideals and why he gains them. Whereas other movies, the Reeves Superman movies and the Superman Returns, which is, I guess, sort of a spiritual sort of successor to that, and also all the cartoon Supermans and stuff, the Superman that we know is a fully formed Superman. Truth, justice, and the American way. He doesn't kill people. He stands for whatever. This was more like, how did he become that? What happened that he became that way? And what is the reality of two, demigod level beings, duking it out in the middle of a populated city? Like, the idea that you can walk away from something like that, like squeaky clean, is sort of ridiculous. And his whole moral problem and his dilemma about killing Zod and whatever, I like that. And I also remember even before the sequel to Man of Steel became Batman v Superman, and even before there was this whole idea of like, we're going to do a DC universe like the Marvel universe, way back right when I saw Man of Steel, I said the sequel to this is going to deal with the implications of what happened here, both in terms of Superman's character development and his development of ideals and his aversion to killing and destruction, and in terms of the world view of Superman. And apparently that's exactly, not only is that exactly what's happening, but that's also the crux of the clash between him and Batman. And that was pretty clear to me just by watching Man of Steel. It wasn't like, oh, destruction porn or whatever. I was like, no, this shows why he became how he was. It was a formative event for not Superman, for Kal-El. In fact, you don't see Superman in Man of Steel. I think it's cleverly named Man of Steel because there's one scene in that movie that features Superman. The very last scene in which he shoots down the drone that the general has following him or whatever. He's Superman in that scene. He's not Superman in any of the movie. Even when he's wearing the suit, he's not Superman yet. He's becoming Superman. He's transitioning into the character that we know, that stands for truth, justice, and the American way, and does everything he can to save lives, and will go to great lengths to avoid any damage and any impact or whatever, because of what happened in his sort of formative period. So I'm looking forward to that aspect of it. I think that's going to be its strongest suit. I just hope that they didn't blow their load too early by just kind of revealing a lot of the stuff that's going to happen in it. But we'll see. And I don't know, next week, I mean, God damn it, we need a Rogue One trailer already. And I think, did I say 2 weeks ago that there's rumors that there's already 2 or 3 of them floating around, and Disney's just trying to figure out when they want to put it out and which one. Maybe they're going to run it with Batman v Superman. Hopefully not. Hopefully they'll do it before that so that I can talk about it next week. But if not, then the week after is going to be an extra long Neoncast. But yeah, thanks for listening. And thanks for subscribing and tweeting me about it and commenting on YouTube and sharing it if you are. At Neon Taster is my Twitter account, the podcast Twitter account for your podcast related comments, because it's easier for me to see when they're tweeted at that account, is at Neoncast. And if you have any kind of like long form comments or suggestions or whatever, neoncastpod at gmail.com. So thank you for listening, if you have been listening, and if not, then why am I talking to you?